Welcome to True Echo, where powerful moments meet unforgettable lessons. Here, we bring you real stories, or ones that feel so real, they just might be. Today's story. It begins in a lobby filled with wealth, silence, and judgment, and ends with the kind of reckoning that echoes far beyond the velvet ropes. What happens when a black CEO is mistaken for staff, and what he does next shocks everyone watching. This is Black CEO books room under Alias and gets kicked out. What he does next makes them regret it. The Arlington Club didn't speak. It whispered. It was a place where silence wasn't empty, it was earned. White marble floors, imported lilies scenting the air, and the softest rustle of old money, everything about the lobby told you it was a space where being seen was only for those who already belonged. Daniel Carter stepped into that stillness. Tall, composed, mid-40s, and carved from the kind of presence that made people glance twice, though rarely for the reason they should. His suit, deep navy and perfectly tailored, caught the low chandelier light, just enough to hint at understated power. He looked like he belonged. But that wasn't the point. That was never the point. He crossed the marble slowly, deliberately, toward the front desk. Melissa Grant barely looked up. Her fingers hovered over her keyboard, polished and efficient. Her eyes landed on him, and everything shifted. Her posture stiffened, her smile evaporated like steam. "Staff entrance is in the back," she said. Daniel didn't flinch. "I have a reservation," he said smoothly. "Meeting room 4. Name's Carter." Melissa's fingers paused. She squinted, typed. Her expression didn't soften when the name confirmed. "I'll need to see your membership card," she said, tone still wrapped in suspicion, despite what her screen said. As Daniel reached into his inner jacket pocket, her hand slipped under the counter. A silent alarm clicked into place. Security notified. He knew the drill. She didn't ask any more questions. Didn't try to make small talk. She just waited, watched, as if daring him to prove he wasn't a problem. When the security guard appeared moments later, polished but postured like backup, the tension sharpened like a wire between them. "He says he has a reservation," Melissa explained, as if what she saw on her screen wasn't quite enough to believe. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "My name is Daniel Carter. Room 4. My guest will arrive shortly, Takashi Mori." The guard blinked. That name should have landed like thunder. But nothing. Not a flicker of recognition. Daniel extended his card again. Slowly. With the grace of someone who knew the cost of appearing impatient. The guard narrowed his eyes, not from concern, but calculation. Daniel saw it for what it was. A measurement. The way some men inspect a watch not to admire it, but to assess whether it's counterfeit. "We'll need management confirmation," the guard said. "Until then, we ask that you wait outside the lounge area." Daniel tilted his head slightly, expression unmoved. "I'm not waiting outside. I've done everything required. You can call who you need, but I won't be treated like a delivery." The room began to notice. A woman near the fireplace lowered her newspaper just enough to watch. A man in gray murmured to his companion, casting a glance that flickered with thinly veiled curiosity. And Amanda Holden, seated quietly across the room, lifted her phone. She didn't speak. Just aimed her camera. Live. Subtle. Unblinking. On screen, her followers asked. "Why is he being stopped? Looks calm. What's the issue?" Daniel didn't know about the stream yet. He only felt the shift. That slow, sinking weight of being made to perform dignity for an audience who pretended not to see what they had caused. Melissa hadn't taken the card. She looked beyond him, toward the security guard now standing like a polite threat. "There's no note of a guest," she said again, though she knew it was irrelevant. It wasn't about the note. Daniel's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. My guest and I are both board members. We didn't file guest lists. This is an internal meeting. The lobby, once thick with wealth and certainty, felt off balance now. The usual confidence had given way to discomfort. But no one moved to correct it. No one dared. Daniel looked Melissa in the eyes. Tell me, is this policy, or just policy for people like me? That made her blink. For the first time, the edges of her trained neutrality frayed. She opened her mouth. Closed it. The security guard shifted his stance, casting a glance toward the hallway, silently begging a supervisor to step in and rescue him from this slow, public unraveling. But no one came. Amanda's stream ticked past 1,000 live viewers. In the center of it all stood Daniel Carter, still, calm, and holding every eye in the room without a raised voice or clenched fist. Just presence. And that was enough to make them all uncomfortable. I walked in, said my name, gave you my card. I've done everything right, he said, now looking not just at Melissa but at the people watching from behind couches, newspapers, and cups of brandy. Still, I'm being treated like a problem. He paused. You didn't need a reason. You had a feeling. That was enough. Amanda whispered into the camera. They're still questioning him. He's done nothing wrong. Daniel could feel it building, the quiet grief that always accompanied moments like this. He thought he'd be past it by now. But the sting never dulled. Not really. He didn't storm. He didn't raise a hand. He simply reached into his coat and pulled out a second card. Smaller. Simpler. A stark contrast to the ornate club around them. He placed it on the counter, gently. Melissa leaned forward to read. Her face went pale. Daniel Carter. Chief Executive Officer. Carter International Hospitality. And below that, a corporate number and a line in Japanese characters, Takashi's signature partnership. She looked up slowly, like someone waking from a long, dangerous dream. Mr. Carter, she asked, her voice cracking like dry wood. The security guard took a small step back. Not retreating from a threat, but from embarrassment. From recognition. From the weight of having picked the wrong side too quickly. Melissa fumbled over her next words. The reservation was under D. Carter. I didn't know. I do that intentionally, Daniel said, his voice like stone across water. I book with initials so I can see how people are treated before they know who I am. She blinked. Her mouth opened slightly. He turned to the security guard. I've held meetings here with ambassadors. Senators. I've funded renovations to your penthouse floor. And yet. He paused. I was told to use the back entrance. Amanda's stream hit 2,000 live viewers. Comments poured in. He's the CEO. This is what racism looks like. How many others walked out the back before someone hit record? Daniel looked around the room. To the man who had sneered behind the fireplace. To the couple pretending to read a menu. To the marble, the chandeliers, the velvet cushions, all of it complicit in a system that had just misjudged him. My guest arrives in 10 minutes, Daniel said. What should I tell him? That this place still hasn't learned how to tell the difference between confidence and threat. Melissa swallowed hard. Her hands trembled. Mr. Carter. I'm deeply sorry. I didn't mean. It's not about what you meant, Daniel cut in gently, without cruelty. It's about what you assumed. For the first time, she couldn't hide behind protocol. Her eyes welled with something real. Not fear of being fired. Fear of being exposed. Of being the villain in a story that millions might watch. Amanda's voice floated again into the stream. They were about to kick out the man who owns the meeting room. Daniel stepped back, reclaiming the card, sliding it into his wallet. There was nothing theatrical in his movement. No gloating. No satisfaction. Just stillness. And clarity. Melissa stood frozen as if motion might undo her. Her body screamed apology, but her words couldn't find purchase. The apology wasn't for Daniel anymore. It was for herself, for the reflection she couldn't unsee. Daniel turned, not toward the exit, but toward the velvet chairs by the bay windows. The same space where, just moments earlier, a man in a gray blazer had casually leaned away, as though Daniel's presence might stain the upholstery. Now, Daniel sat with poise. With ownership. Amanda's camera stayed still, panning slowly, deliberately. The viewer count ticked toward 2,500. The comment section filled with support, outrage, and stories from others who had stood in Daniel's shoes and remained invisible. At that moment, Melissa finally moved. She whispered something to the assistant manager who had emerged like a ghost in a crisis. Then, to everyone's surprise, she stepped from behind the counter and walked across the floor toward Daniel. Her heels clicked with a tension that didn't exist before. She stood in front of him, shoulders low, lips trembling, eyes wide. "Mr. Carter," she said, breath barely present. Daniel looked up, expression neutral. Not forgiving, not condemning, simply watchful. I wanted to speak with you. In private, if you'll allow me." A beat passed. Daniel considered the request. Then stood with quiet precision and followed her toward a side room off the lobby. Amanda didn't follow, but her camera caught the door closing. Inside the glass-walled room, Melissa broke. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, I didn't know who you were. I wasn't trying to offend you, I just—" "You didn't need to know who I was," Daniel interrupted gently. "That's the entire point." She flinched, as though those words hit harder than any shout ever could. I made a mistake. A terrible one." "Yes," Daniel said. "I've submitted my resignation." I knew what this would become," she added, voice catching. "I understand if you accept it." Daniel watched her. She wasn't groveling. Not exactly. But she was unraveling. Not because she'd been caught, but because she'd been confronted with the kind of truth that lives behind layers of denial. That her instincts had been trained to exclude. He took a breath. "I don't want to ruin your life," he said. "But I do believe in accountability." She nodded, tears brimming now. "Whatever happens. I understand." He exhaled slowly, like something too heavy had finally shifted off his chest. "You'll receive full severance," he said. "But more than that, I hope you use this moment. Don't bury it. Learn from it. Because the next man who walks in here won't be me. And no one will be live streaming then." Melissa's shoulders shook slightly. And still, Daniel stood like a mountain, firm, unmoved, not victorious, but grounded. Back in the lobby, Amanda's stream continued to roll, though now it captured only the ripple of aftermath. She didn't narrate anymore. The comments spoke for her. He didn't yell once. "This is why we film. Dignity. Absolute dignity. This is how racism actually operates, quiet, polite, and deadly." Daniel stepped out of the side room, buttoning his jacket with slow precision. He checked his watch, 11:01. Right on time. He looked out across the lobby. The crowd had thinned. The noise had faded. But the silence had weight now. People weren't pretending not to notice, they were wondering what else they had missed. He didn't look back. There was no need. Melissa was gone, the manager stood awkwardly at the front desk like a substitute teacher in a classroom he didn't control. The security guard was nowhere in sight. Daniel returned to his seat. Not to rest, but to reclaim space. The same space he was nearly forced out of 20 minutes ago. He let the air settle around him, cool and sharp like the frost outside. And then the front doors opened again. A man in a charcoal gray overcoat entered, tall and composed. He removed his gloves as he walked, each movement precise. His name was Takashi Mori, and the moment he stepped inside, the air shifted once more. Takashi's eyes scanned the room until they landed on Daniel. He smiled softly and approached. "Daniel-san," he greeted, voice smooth, respectful. "I hope I'm not late." "Right on time," Daniel replied. They exchanged a brief bow, then a handshake. Takashi's gaze lingered briefly on the desk behind them. "Something happened here," he said. Daniel nodded, but didn't explain. "Let's just say the negotiation started earlier than expected." They made their way to meeting room 4. Inside, everything was as Daniel had arranged: polished wood, leather chairs, a table set for two with a carafe of hot coffee. The room felt insulated from the drama outside, and yet, Daniel carried the echo of it within him. Takashi set down his folder. "I reviewed the draft. The terms look fair." Daniel nodded. "Minor edits on the licensing clauses and we're aligned." But he paused. "There's one proposal I'd like to add, not to the contract, but as a commitment." Takashi raised a brow. "Go on." "A scholarship fund," Daniel said. "Carter International and Mori Global. For students of color. Not just workers. Future GMs, CEOs. Decision makers." Takashi blinked, absorbing the idea. "That's bold," he said finally. "But I like it." Daniel's voice held quiet fire. "I'm tired of watching young talent be dismissed, pushed aside, questioned for entering rooms they've already earned a place in. This morning was just a reminder." Takashi reached for his pen and signed without hesitation. "Let's plant something better." Their handshake wasn't just the close of a deal, it was the beginning of something bigger. The meeting lasted just under an hour, but its weight would last much longer. When Daniel and Takashi stepped out of the boardroom, the lobby was quieter. Amanda Holden was gone, but the air still buzzed with the memory of what had happened. An incident people might try to forget, but couldn't quite shake off. Daniel paused at the edge of the room, his gaze drifting to the front desk. The assistant manager stood there, pale and tight-lipped. A man now keenly aware that every step he made was under silent observation. Takashi followed Daniel's glance and leaned in. "So. They didn't recognize the lion walking in." Daniel gave a faint smile, tired but amused. "No. They saw a shadow and assumed threat." "Good thing the lion carries his own spotlight," Takashi said, his voice laced with dry wisdom. Daniel chuckled once under his breath but said nothing more. Some truths were too deep to dress up in metaphor. Some mornings too raw to polish with charm. As Takashi exited, Daniel lingered. His eyes took one last sweep across the lobby, his own quiet courtroom. He didn't linger out of nostalgia, but from responsibility. This place had tried to reject him. And it had failed. The irony was sharp. Daniel Carter, who had helped fund the very room they tried to push him out of, was not just a guest. He was part of the foundation. And yet, when he walked in, none of that mattered. Only his skin did. He turned toward the double glass doors, hand brushing the edge of the lapel he had straightened 100 times in similar moments. Outside, the wind waited. But so did clarity. This wasn't justice. Not yet. Not entirely. But it was truth. Seen. Heard. Shared. And that, sometimes, was more powerful than anything else. The late morning frost greeted Daniel as he stepped out onto the sidewalk, golden light bouncing off the Arlington Club's towering windows behind him. His breath clouded the air, his steps crisp and sure. He didn't feel triumphant. But he felt solid, like the foundation had shifted beneath them all, just slightly. That was enough for now. Back inside, the staff scrambled quietly behind the scenes. The assistant manager was already on a call with corporate, and the name, Daniel Carter, would now live in whispers for a very different reason than when he first walked in. By the afternoon, Amanda Holden's live stream would pass over 50,000 views. By evening, it would go viral. By week's end, the Arlington Club would issue a public apology and announce a comprehensive review of its membership and training policies. But to Daniel, the real work had only just begun. A week later, Daniel and Takashi launched the Carter Mori Fellowship Fund, an endowment for Black and minority students entering the hospitality industry. Not in honor of what happened that day, but because of how often it still happens in silence. And quietly, emails began arriving at Daniel's office. From other executives. From janitors. From hotel staff across the country. Thank you. I saw what they did to you. It happens to me every day. I wish I had your calm. You gave me courage. Daniel never responded to all of them. He couldn't. But he read every single one. And on days when the mask of composure weighed a little heavier, he remembered, he wasn't alone. He never had been. In every velvet lobby, every marble hallway, every moment where doubt dressed itself in politeness, there were others like him. Standing. Waiting. Proving. And now, maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't have to prove so much. Maybe a crack had formed in the foundation. And through that crack, the light could finally shine in. Sometimes, the loudest voice in the room doesn't come from shouting, it comes from standing your ground with grace. Daniel Carter didn't fight back with anger. He didn't scream or threaten. He simply revealed the truth. And in doing so, exposed an entire system built on assumptions. As Daniel said, it's not about what you intended. It's about what you assumed. Let that sink in. If this story moved you, taught you something, or made you reflect, please hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to True Echo. We tell stories that matter. Stories that resonate. Stories that echo long after the screen goes dark. Drop a comment below, what would you have done in Daniel's shoes? Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that just might change the way you see the world.